In the bustling port city of Genoa, located on the northwestern coast of what is now Italy, a baby boy was born in the year 1451. That boy would grow up to become one of the most renowned navigators in human history, Christopher Columbus. Born near the harbor, he grew up listening to sailors' tales of mysterious lands beyond the horizon. Most people ignored these stories, dismissing them as mere fantasy, but not Columbus. His father, Domenico Colombo, was a humble wool weaver who led a simple, hard-working life. To support the family, he also sold wine and cheese, staples at every Italian market stall. His mother, Susanna Fontanarosa, was a devoted housewife who managed the home with diligence and care. Life was not easy for young Christopher. Instead of spending his early years in a classroom, he worked alongside his father, selling wine and weaving wool. His childhood was far from comfortable. It wasn't until he was 9 years old that he finally began formal schooling, much later than most children. Yet this late start sparked within him a deep curiosity about the world beyond his city. From a young age, Columbus was drawn to the sea. The Mediterranean became his first classroom, and the deck of a ship his first school desk. He began sailing in his teens, gaining valuable experience as a navigator. He traveled extensively across the Mediterranean, visiting ports like Marseille, Algiers, Sicily, Sardinia, and Corsica. By 1475, he had reportedly reached as far as Chios, a Greek island near the coast of Asia Minor, a significant voyage for a young sailor of the time. In the year 1470, Columbus joined a fleet organized by the powerful Spinola and Di Negro families, Genoese merchants with aspirations beyond Europe. Their journey took them past the narrow Strait of Gibraltar and into the vast Atlantic Ocean, with England as their ultimate destination. But adventure does not come without danger. Near Cape St. Vincent, off the coast of Portugal, disaster struck. French privateers attacked the convoy. Ships were sunk, crew members perished, and the sea turned hostile. Columbus's ship was among those lost. He barely escaped with his life. Clinging to a piece of floating wood, he eventually washed ashore near Lagos, Portugal. It was a near-death experience that would only strengthen his resolve. The sea had nearly claimed him, but Columbus wasn't ready to give up. The horizon still called his name. After surviving a dramatic shipwreck off the coast of Portugal, Christopher Columbus made his way to the heart of the Portuguese kingdom, Lisbon. It was here, in this thriving maritime capital, that fate began to chart a new course for the ambitious Genoese sailor. Upon arriving in Lisbon, Columbus sought out the person he knew best, his brother, Bartholomew Columbus. Bartholomew, already established in the city, was working as a skilled mapmaker. The two brothers reunited and began working together, poring over nautical charts and sea routes with intense focus and passion. Through this experience, Columbus began developing a keen interest in geography and navigation, eventually becoming a competent cartographer himself. While living in Portugal, Columbus's life took another significant turn. He married Filipa Moniz Perestrelo, a woman of noble birth. Filipa came from a respected family with strong ties to the Portuguese court. This marriage not only elevated Columbus's social standing, but also opened doors to circles of influence and royal audiences. As a result of these new connections, Columbus found himself invited to the court of King John II of Portugal on several occasions. It was during one of these meetings that the king shared with him a letter written by the Italian scholar Paolo dal Pozzo Toscanelli. In the letter, Toscanelli discussed the possibility of reaching Asia by sailing west across the Atlantic Ocean, an idea that deeply inspired Columbus. This was more than just a passing curiosity for Columbus. Once back home, he began gathering documents, nautical records, and any scraps of knowledge that supported the notion of unknown lands beyond the western horizon. He became convinced that far to the west of Cape St. Vincent, beyond the vast Atlantic, lay a continent waiting to be found, a land inhabited, fertile, and reachable by sea. Drawing on his years of maritime experience, Columbus also understood the weather patterns and harsh conditions of the northern Atlantic. He knew well that the further north one traveled, the colder and more dangerous the waters became. So, instead of heading northwest, he decided to sail south along the coast of Africa. His journey took him through the Canary Islands, Cape Verde, and eventually along the Gulf of Guinea as part of Portuguese expeditions. These voyages allowed him to sharpen his skills and prepare for what he believed would be the greatest journey of all, sailing westward across the Atlantic to reach the East. Christopher Columbus believed there was something in his mind that could revolutionize the world of his time. He was convinced that if humans could understand the patterns of the wind and the structure of the sea, they could travel anywhere on Earth without fear. To him, the world wasn't a barrier. It was an open map waiting to be explored. He developed a strategic plan for how one might cross the vast Atlantic Ocean and return safely. His idea was bold yet methodical. First, he would sail from Spain, heading southward down the coast until reaching the Canary Islands and then Cape Verde. From there, he would take advantage of the trade winds, the powerful easterlies, to push his ship westward across the Atlantic. Once the journey reached its western limits, he planned to sail north and use the prevailing westerlies to loop back toward Europe. This was not mere guesswork. It was the fruit of years of seafaring experience and sharp observation. In 1484, Columbus sought to make his dream a reality. He appeared before King John II of Portugal, presenting a daring proposal to lead a fleet westward across the uncharted Atlantic in search of a new route to Japan and India. The king was intrigued but cautious. He ordered his royal advisors, astronomers, mathematicians, and scholars to examine Columbus's plan thoroughly. After careful study, the scholars came to a troubling conclusion. Columbus had drastically underestimated the distance between Europe and Asia via the western route. Their calculations showed that the journey would be much longer and more dangerous than he imagined. To be certain, King John II even dispatched a small exploratory fleet to test Columbus's proposed route. But when the ships reached the coordinates Columbus had suggested, they found nothing but endless ocean. To make matters worse, the following year brought profound sorrow for Columbus. His beloved wife passed away, leaving him emotionally devastated and politically defeated. The Portuguese crown rejected his ambitious plan. Yet this was not the end of Columbus's dream. Rather than surrender, he made a quiet but crucial decision: to entrust his young son to the care of his sister-in-law and set off once more in pursuit of his vision. After facing personal tragedy and political rejection, Christopher Columbus found himself at yet another crossroads. He and his young son Diego set out for the town of Palos de la Frontera, hoping that his sister-in-law would take the boy in. But to his disappointment, she refused. His first major problem, finding care for his son, remained unsolved. At the age of 34, Columbus was a widowed father with limited options. Upon hearing that the monastery of Santa Maria de la Rabida offered shelter to travelers, he decided to seek refuge there. He made his way there. Upon arrival, he befriended the monastery's respected prior, Friar Antonio de Marchena, hoping the holy man might offer refuge for young Diego. His instincts proved right. The kind friar agreed to care for the child, and Diego soon found warmth and stability within the monastery's peaceful walls. But luck was not finished with Columbus yet. As he shared his dream of sailing westward to find a new route to the riches of Asia, Friar Marchena saw promise in the navigator's conviction. Moved by Columbus's passion and determination, the friar wrote him a letter of introduction, one that would open new doors. Columbus took that letter to another well-connected clergyman, Friar Hernando de Talavera, a trusted religious advisor to Queen Isabella of Castile. Talavera, intrigued by the proposal, saw to it that Columbus would be given an audience with the Spanish monarchs, King Ferdinand of Aragon and Queen Isabella of Castile. Yet even this promising development came with hurdles. Columbus waited 7 long years for his chance to present his plan formally. During that time, he lived in near poverty and faced mounting skepticism from court officials. When he finally stood before the crown and laid out his bold vision of sailing west to reach the east, many at court, including King Ferdinand's royal advisors, dismissed the idea as a fantasy. In that initial meeting, his proposal was rejected, but Columbus was not a man easily dissuaded. Despite the setbacks, despite the doubters, he vowed to press on. His dream of discovering new worlds and enriching Spain burned too brightly to be snuffed out by a single rejection. While residing in the vibrant Spanish city of Cordoba, Christopher Columbus began a new chapter in his personal life. There, he entered into a relationship with Beatriz Enriquez de Arana, a woman of modest background but deep compassion. Their bond blossomed despite his ongoing struggles, and in 1488, they had a son together, whom they named Ferdinand, a child who would later become a key figure in preserving and writing about his father's legacy. But while his family grew, Columbus's ambition remained unshaken. Frustrated by the Spanish crown's continued delays in responding to his proposal for a westward sea voyage to Asia, he searched for new opportunities. He even tried his hand at a new trade, selling books, as he waited anxiously for royal support that seemed endlessly postponed. Tired of waiting, Columbus decided to revisit an old path. He returned to Portugal, hoping to once again convince King John II to support his grand plan. However, he arrived at a time when Portugal was already celebrating a major maritime breakthrough. The Portuguese navigator Bartolomeu Dias had just accomplished what no European had before, sailing around the southern tip of Africa, known as the Cape of Good Hope, and thus opening a sea route to the riches of the Indian subcontinent. This triumph greatly diminished interest in Columbus's alternative idea of sailing westward. If Portugal had already found a way to India by going east, why fund an uncertain journey into the Atlantic? Realizing time was running out and competition was fierce, Columbus knew he had to act quickly. If someone else reached Asia first, using a proven route, his westward vision would be discarded forever. Determined not to be left behind, he sent his brother Bartholomew Columbus to England to plead his case before King Henry VII, while Columbus himself traveled to France in hopes of securing support from its monarchy. Unfortunately, both efforts ended in failure. But just as hope began to fade, history shifted in his favor. On January 2, 1492, the Moors, Muslim rulers who had long occupied Granada, the last stronghold of Islamic rule in Spain, surrendered to the forces of the united Spanish monarchs, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile. The entire kingdom erupted in celebration, and this national triumph breathed new confidence into Columbus. Seeing the momentum on his side, Columbus once again approached the Spanish rulers with a revised proposal. This time, he made a bold offer. If he discovered new lands, he would claim them immediately for Spain, and all treasures found would be delivered to the crown. In return, he asked for three things: the noble title of Admiral of the Ocean Sea, governorship over any new territories he discovered, and a 10% share of all wealth acquired from those lands. The fate of his lifelong dream now rested on how the monarchs would respond. Even after years of campaigning and relentless effort, Christopher Columbus's bold proposal to discover a new sea route to the east by sailing westward was once again rejected by the Spanish crown. It was a bitter blow, especially after waiting so long. But Columbus was not a man easily dissuaded. Undeterred, he sought help from a powerful ally, a clergyman close to Queen Isabella herself. This priest, moved by Columbus's determination and persuaded by the logic of his vision, became a vocal supporter. He used his influence at court to advocate for Columbus's cause. His passion and persistence eventually sparked Queen Isabella's interest, and she began to reconsider the proposal that once seemed too risky. When Columbus's plan was brought before King Ferdinand again, this time with the Queen's cautious endorsement, the royal couple agreed to give the idea one final hearing. After thorough deliberation and consultation, on April 17, 1492, Columbus was officially granted royal support for his expedition. A contract was signed, granting him noble titles and rights to future discoveries, including Admiral of the Ocean Sea and Governor of all lands he might find, along with a 10% share of any riches acquired. And so, with the blessings of the Spanish crown, Columbus's long-cherished dream was finally set in motion. The expedition began in earnest during the summer of 1492, when Columbus arrived at the small port town of Palos de la Frontera to prepare for his westward voyage. There, he assembled his modest fleet, 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and his larger flagship, the Santa Maria. On the morning of Friday, August 3rd, 1492, these three ships set sail from Palos, leaving behind the familiar shores of Europe and venturing into the vast unknown of the Atlantic Ocean. Aboard the fleet were 88 crew members, including navigators, soldiers, and a royal notary. Among the cargo was a letter of introduction from the Spanish monarchs, intended for the Great Khan of the Mongols, an ambitious diplomatic gesture should they indeed reach Asia. For weeks, the voyage continued with no sign of land. The horizon offered only endless water and sky. Morale waned and tension among the crew grew. Still, Columbus urged them onward, convinced that discovery lay just beyond the horizon. Then, in the early hours of October 12, 1492, a shout rang out from the crow's nest. Land! It was the voice of Rodrigo de Triana, the lookout aboard the Pinta, who had first spotted a dark line against the sea. The crew erupted in celebration. Columbus, deeply moved, fell to his knees upon reaching shore, thanking God for granting him the opportunity to change the course of history. He had not reached Asia, but he had landed in a world no European had ever set foot upon before. When Christopher Columbus first set foot on the unfamiliar land he had long dreamt of, he had no idea that he was standing not on the shores of Asia, as he believed, but on one of the many islands that make up the Bahamas in the Americas. To him, this tropical paradise, lush, green, and filled with exotic sights, was part of the fabled Indies he had sought for so long. As Columbus and his crew ventured inland, they noticed native inhabitants cautiously observing them from the trees and behind distant brush. These people were unfamiliar in language, dress, and manner, yet Columbus, convinced that he had reached the East, referred to them as Indians, a name that would tragically stick for centuries to come. Without hesitation, Columbus took symbolic possession of the island in the name of Queen Isabella of Spain, raising the Spanish flag and offering prayers of gratitude. This act of claiming a land that already had its own people, culture, and history was the beginning of a dramatic and often painful collision of worlds. After spending time exploring nearby islands, Columbus returned to Spain full of excitement. He presented his findings to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, announcing with great pride that he had reached the Indies and discovered new lands ready for Spain's glory and enrichment. Fueled by royal approval and public celebration, Columbus would go on to make 3 more voyages across the Atlantic in 1493, 1498, and 1502, each time believing he was venturing deeper into Asia. He spoke of approaching the coast of Japan, of empires yet to be found, of rivers and lands rich with gold. But all the while, he was sailing through a region that was not Asia at all. Unbeknownst to him, Columbus had stumbled upon a vast, previously unknown continent that would later be called the New World, America. Yet in his lifetime, he never realized the true scope of his discovery. More surprisingly, he never once set foot on what we now call mainland North or South America. His journeys took him only to places like the Bahamas, parts of the Caribbean, including Cuba, Hispaniola, and some of the Lesser Antilles. Beautiful lands, yes, but not the continent he so desperately sought. Columbus's mistake was enormous, but so was the impact of his voyage. Though he believed he had reached Asia, what he truly found was the bridge between 2 worlds that would never be the same again. While Christopher Columbus's voyages across the Atlantic were once hailed as triumphant breakthroughs in the age of exploration, his later years were marked by controversy, bitterness, and a dramatic fall from grace. Despite the honors and praise he initially received, Columbus's happiness and legacy were far from secure. One major reason was that he was not Spanish by birth. He was an outsider, a Genoese foreigner whose soaring success stirred jealousy among the Spanish nobility and court. As his fame grew, so did his number of political enemies. Columbus had been granted immense authority over the new territories he discovered, and with that power came difficult decisions. However, he was not a skilled administrator. Accounts from his time as governor on the island of Hispaniola paint a troubling picture. A harsh and authoritarian ruler who responded to rebellion and dissent with violence. When the native Taino people began to resist Spanish control and treatment, Columbus crushed the rebellion with brutal force. He ordered executions, enslaved many, and ruled through fear. These actions angered both the local population and fellow Spaniards, who began documenting and reporting his abuses. The very lands he had claimed for Spain became the ground for his undoing. By the time Columbus was in his early 50s, his health, both mental and physical, had deteriorated. At the age of 53, his relationship with King Ferdinand had soured. The crown, once so eager to support him, now saw Columbus as a liability. He was quietly removed from authority and encouraged to retire from his role as an explorer and administrator, settling in the Spanish city of Valladolid. In his final years, Columbus lived under the care of his family, suffering from various ailments. Though he still dreamed of titles and honors that he felt were owed to him, the golden age of his ambitions had passed. On May 20th, 1506, during the gentle bloom of spring, Christopher Columbus died at the age of 55, a man once revered, now largely forgotten by the very empire he had helped enrich. His legacy, though, would outlive him in ways he never imagined, forever linked to the discovery of a world he never truly understood.